Perfect. Let's go here. All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. I'm here with Justin Carlson, CCO and founder of East Daley Capital Advisors. Justin, it's an absolute pleasure. We kind of hit the ground running. I wish we would have hit record already, but we got going in all kinds of different directions. But welcome to the show. Yeah, it's not Justin on Justin for the first time, but it's I always love having a Justin on the call here. Man, where are you visiting from today? First of all, you got a cool background. For those who aren't watching, I'm going to describe it because you look like a busy man.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm in Denver. Actually in Littleton. If those of you feel familiar with Denver, sort of the west side of the Denver metro area, it is a cold day as we've had that first blast of cold come through that everybody's talking about for this weekend. But yeah, you saw all the stuff on the wall. It's actually my dad's 1964 Bianchi on the wall. He wanted to be an Olympic biker when he was 17. So that survived hanging in the garage of my mom's house, and so
What?
restored and put on the wall, and it even got a couple awards there from some bike shows I went to, which was pretty cool. But
Man,
yeah.
so give like I don't know much about the bike world aside from my Mongoose BMX bike I used to have
Yeah.
back in the day. But is that like a very unique bike or what's the story with that kind of bike?
Oh, so my dad bought this bike. It was the best bike you could buy in 1964. It was,
What?
made in Italy. It was handmade in Italy, mind you. So, like, for those of you who are, a little mechanically minded, like the holes, like for screws and whatnot, were drilled by hand. So some of them are
What?
like cockeyed and like not exactly, it's not like a machine in there. And so, I mean, I just discovered all this as we were rebuilding it, and he bought that with his paper route money, and that's what he spent. Basically all his money on was that bike there, and I don't know,
No.
pretty cool heirloom to have from my dad that gets to. And I've ridden it too, by the way. It's not just a fancy thing on the wall. I did a 100-mile race in New Mexico on it, so yeah.
What?
The thing rides, yeah, it's good. You'd be
So
shocked. That thing is made of all aluminum, like if or chrome, excuse me, like it's a chrome frame painted green, which is just
really?
amazing. Like who makes an entire frame out of chrome? Well, I guess in 1964 we made quarters out of silver and frames out of chrome. You know what I mean? Like it's cool.
How far have we come? Hey man, that is such an and I love how you have it on your wall behind your computer because it's obviously a talking point.
Yeah.
I'm assuming I'm not the first guy who's asked about it.
No.
Wow. So you did a 100-mile race on that thing?
Yeah, and I rode around Denver a couple times. They've like a 60-mile route around Denver that you can take, and I've done that a couple times on the bike. So it's fun, right? For those of you that are bikers, they probably understand old steel's kind of fun because it's everything today is made of carbon fiber. So like
Yeah.
if there's like a crack in the sidewalk, you feel it. On
Yeah.
these old steel bikes, like they don't feel that kind of stuff. They're just
Really?
built different, right? So they have the natural shock absorber of the bike itself. So
No
it's
kidding.
cool.
What a
Yeah.
neat story. And so you're obviously your old man was a biker. Did he ever make it to the Olympics?
Well, that's the funny thing. No, he didn't. He definitely wanted to, and it's a funny thing that my dad died actually the same year we started East Daley, but he he never rode in my lifetime. Like I never saw him ride. So this is one of those sort of
Huh.
like, hey, dad, you hung this up in the garage and you never like, for those of you with kids, and I don't mean to get too sentimental here, but like share your hobbies, share your loves with your kids, because my dad didn't share that with me, and I had to find it out later. Like, and I've
Wow.
got pictures. There's a picture on the wall back there of him standing next to the bike, and there's
Yeah.
I actually, my dad never threw anything away. My mom found a box of his old jerseys, and they're like these heavy wool, like like wool jerseys, and you're like, now today everything's made of oil now, so it's like all thin and like breathable, and that stuff is like, it's thick and heavy. I'm like, how did you ride with this? But
No kidding.
it's
No,
pretty cool stuff.
that is, man. And but I can appreciate you sharing that. I mean, as a father, I've got an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. Some of the hobby, like I would say I do try and share some of the hobbies with them. They're still some young, but
Yeah.
I mean, for yourself, like what, I mean, it sounds like you have kids. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old.
Okay.
So we, and I fish. So fortunately, my 11-year-old loves fishing. I should probably do more of it, but
Yeah.
he's not a bad fly fisherman. So we just need to get him out more, take that
I understand.
time, separate out. So, yeah, but it's good. Like, biking, I'm trying to get him to want to do maybe not the biking stuff. I run too. So like he can bike, I can run, like whatever. I'm just trying to get him out there to do that stuff. But
I
you know
hear you.
how hard it is these days to get your kids away from screens. It's like, well, Dad, I'm playing online with my friend in Tulsa. And I'm like, okay, well, all right, well, I'm going to go for a run. Maybe next time, catch you
Yeah.
next time.
Man, I get it. It's that could be a whole nother topic of conversation, but
Yeah.
it's we found at least every family's different, but we've been able to find a healthy balance of the whole screen time thing. And my daughter, she's 9 or 8, sorry, but she's big into softball, and she wanted to get stronger, and because she's a little smaller, and so I managed to bring her to. I'm part owner in a gym here in Katy, but I managed to bring her to the gym on Sunday mornings, and so getting to just do
Nice.
little workouts with her because that's my sort of vocation is
Yeah.
health and fitness, and so. But yeah, we kind of get to do our little workout thing together, but man, it's tough. Like my son, I don't he's like me. I guess my mom was telling me the other day that she had bought me a Nintendo when I was like 4 years old. And it took everything in her power to peel me away from that thing.
Yeah.
So my son's the same way. My daughter's kind of take it or leave it. But yeah, it's again, that's a whole nother topic of conversation. But
Yeah. Right. Start a
yeah,
different podcast.
yeah, no kidding. How to parent kids who all they want to do is play on their iPads. Real quick though, too, you've got an absolute library behind you too. I'm curious if you were to gift a book out of that library you got behind you, just one, what would that be? What's the most impactful book you got there?
Oh goodness, that's a tough question because there's so many different topics that uh, you could dig in on. Man, I would say, well, listen, a lot of those books are leadership and business stuff and things
Yeah,
like that, and I really geek out on that stuff. So here's one that I'm not all the way through it. So it's I hesitate to advocate it yet, but I geek out on this stuff, so I really like it. But it's called Super Thinking. It's a
okay.
good book, and it's about mental models that
Oh, wow.
you can sort of store in your head to think about problems differently. Like, and we know a lot of them, or I bet you if you started reading the book, you'd be like, oh, I know a bunch of these, but then there's so many more you don't know about, like mental models of ways to think about the world and simplify problems so that you can put it in perspective. So that's the one I'm on now, and I really like it. I
Okay.
also really enjoy the Patrick Lencioni stuff. For those of you familiar, he's like a business psychologist. He runs the Table Group,
Okay.
which is a consulting company. But I really enjoy his sort of logic around leadership and running organizations and stuff. So he's got a whole host of business books and leadership books and things like that that are easy to
Awesome.
read, told as a fable. So they're not super dry like technical stuff. They're more like storylines,
Yeah.
which I appreciate that he took that angle. So it's cool stuff.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I'm sure a lot of people listening are into that too. I mean, I am. I've listened. Anytime I read, it's like, how can I improve my, you know, just like my personal development, my leadership, career, business. And so it's, yeah, oftentimes I find they follow a similar pattern, but there are some where it's like, wow, this is something I've not heard before, the perspective, or again, their experience that they could share that really like sinks and hits home. But look at that, already some nuggets coming out. So those
Yeah.
two books, folks, if you haven't looked at them, or obviously the one and then the other author there, check them out. So shifting gears a little bit there, Justin, I want to ask you, how is 2024 treating you so far? And mainly, did anything surprise you coming out of 2023 that kind of has made you sort of reevaluate things going into 2024? And let's just talk macro level energy. I mean, is everything kind of clicking along like you thought, or is anything different? Like, what's kind of where's your head at right now?
Yeah, I don't know that anything's necessarily different. I mean, some of the big themes, we did a big, big annual report, and so I'm coming off the heels of that sort of report, going, okay, this is where we have our line in the sand, and we're going to track that stuff throughout the year and see how it went. I guess one of the things, that we even talked about in the report was like we expect a lot of M&A to continue in the midstream space specifically. I
Mhm.
don't I haven't followed the E&P space as much, but I know that a lot of folks, or it felt like a lot of the stuff I was hearing was, hey, M&A is going to slow down in the E&P space,
Mm.
but it hasn't. It's accelerated, which makes sense now that I've like put some brain cells to it and actually thought about it.
Yeah.
So maybe that's it's not a surpriser. Like it's one of those things where, once it happens, you're like, ah, duh, okay, well, I should have thought more deeply about that one. But
Yeah.
it's interesting to see the consolidation. Obviously, we just had Southwestern and Chesapeake come out with their, big merger discussion and
Yeah.
conclusion, and obviously we'll see how that all plays out in the final throes of things. But definitely that consolidation in the industry is a thing that we're watching, because it changes the analytic dynamics, or can, when
Yeah.
you've got a smaller number of players having a bigger influence on overall dynamics. So that's, I guess, one thing I'd look at.
Yeah, no, and I want to dive into that. There's a piece of in your guys' report that you do talk about that, which I want to dive into. But I mean, kind of backing up a little bit, I we're and for the audience wondering, I came across Justin on LinkedIn. I don't know if it was East Daley that had put something out, but I somehow clicked around and found you, and then found your guys's report called the Dirty Little Secrets, which again I think is from a marketing perspective was great because it certainly caught my attention. And so I'm curious, can you kind of describe what that report is and then how you came to calling it Dirty Little Secrets?
Yeah, that's it. So, yeah, so Dirty Little Secrets is our annual report. We've been running it for about 8 years. In the beginning, it was like this. It was this book. It was like 300 pages, and we, labored intensely over this thing. But the genesis of it really was, okay, we've got all this knowledge to share. We're uncovering all of this stuff, and East Daily, just as by way of background a bit, is we focus on both the commercial as well as the fundamental components of the energy sector, particularly in midstream. We like to connect the dots. We call it, connecting the molecules to the money, meaning,
Yeah.
fundamental molecules all the way through how people make money from them. And so we had all this knowledge. And what's interesting when you do that is you start to uncover things. So when you're connecting, like, let's say the fundamental analytics of like supply and demand to financially how somebody makes their money, and you do that over and over again, what happens is when you're pairing these data sets, let's say publicly available data sets together, you inherently solve through a balanced equation, unknown things. So, just
Mm.
it's algebra, right? So you got A plus B plus C equals D. Well, D because it's the, let's say the finances that they report in their K's and Q's. A and B because let's say it's publicly available. All of a sudden you've got this C element, and you're like,
Mm.
oh, well, now I know that I could just do math. And that was the dirty little secret, is you could just do math and find things that people weren't finding.
Wow.
And so, 8 years ago when we were thinking about this report, I'm like, it's like a dirty little secret. There's all this free data out there that if you put it together in the right way, you
Mm.
find things that you couldn't discover. It's this dirty little secret. And I joked about on the podcast, or on the webinar that we did, that, the first 3 years were the cover of Dirty Little Secrets was this satin sheet. It's like the Dirty Little Secret. Um,
Yeah.
and there is an actual person under those sheets. I just covered that person.
No way.
Yeah, so it's sort of that's the dirty little secret behind the report, is there is a person under there somewhere.
No
You
way.
just don't know it. Yeah, it's you wouldn't find him under there, but you'd have to go back to the original images and dissect them. But yeah, I
No
mean, that's the genesis of the report. Is we go through the fundamental aspects of crude, natural gas, and NGLs, and then connect that all through the financial expectations for many of the midstream companies. And obviously the fun part about midstream is it's the connection between upstream and downstream. So it forces you to understand where are power markets going, where are,
Yeah.
export markets going, and then upstream, what are producers doing? What is IP rates, production curves? Like you have to do all of that. So
Man,
it's a,
no,
it's a full cycle.
there's a lot to unpack there. And so I want to kind of zoom out and give you an opportunity to tell the origin story of East Daily, because this, you've been in business for a while, but obviously you had a career before that. And then kind of your mission and how it's evolved over the years.
Well, yeah, no, I appreciate that. The origin story was I had come from a company called Ventec Energy. We were, focused primarily on scraping pipeline flow data and putting those together in models. So we would take all that nomination data from the gas grid and put it together into supply demand models, and really founded the team there founded some of the first really holistic ways to use that flow data to understand the market. Well, fast forward, we were bought by Platts and became a part of the Platts S&P
Oh, okay.
family. And after about 3 years there, in 2014, Boardwalk Pipeline Partners had cut their distribution, and the stock had, I think, cratered in half that year. And my partner and I looked at that and were like, well, this is interesting. Like, what? I think we could have predicted that. Like, why didn't the smart guys in Wall Street understand that this company was at risk from a revenue standpoint based on where their assets are? And so we knew. I didn't even know really what EBITDA was. I mean, I knew what it was, but I probably said it wrong. I'm probably still saying it wrong. But I didn't know much about finance. I'm a mechanical engineer by background, so finance wasn't my gig necessarily. But what we said is, let's see if we can't hire a financial analyst to just sort of take our fundamental data, dissect this company at the most granular level possible, and see if we could have predicted it. Now, it turns out we were wrong in what we thought was the cause of them cutting their distribution, but we were right in the fact that if you put all that very granular data together, asset by asset, in the case of many pipelines, you could do it contract by contract, risk each one. You could actually understand why they had to cut their distribution, or violate their debt covenants, or not grow. And as you can remember, back in 2014, not growing was not an option. Like,
Yeah.
You didn't get that option back then.
No
and
kidding.
obviously no one messes with the guys that give you debt, because that's a big no-no. You're not gonna grow either if you can't get debt. So the only logical solution was to cut the distribution, and we felt like you could have seen that about 2 years ahead of when they actually did it. So
Wow.
that was sort of the genesis of East Daley. Was, hey, let's go and put all these data sets together and really from the ground up build these financial models. And then on the backside of that, we started, you have to develop the fundamental models that support that, the supply demand, what's the basin doing? How's the whole market interacting? How are pipes going to fill? How are G&P plants going to fill? We have another fun story of somebody had a client had come to us and asked us about a new plant, and they had done a multiple valuation of how much EBITDA that plant was going to generate. And they came to us and they said, so it's a $200 million plant. We think it's about a 10x multiple. It'll probably generate about $20 million in EBITDA a year. And we said, well, yeah, but they don't have any rigs back there. So I don't know how they're going to generate $20 million if they've got no volume going through their new plant. So sort of like, and that, not that the financial analyst in this case was wrong. They were 100% right. That is what the company had planned to do, but the market had changed on them. And so then now they had a plant that wasn't going to really do anything until they got more rigs back there, or they made other decisions. Let's say shut down another plant and moved all the volumes over to their new, more efficient plant. Those are all operational decisions that these companies can make to mitigate, let's say a financial decision that turns on its head, turns in your face.
Yeah. No
Just
kidding.
like any of us small business owners do, right? You make a bad decision and you're like, all right, well, how am I going to make lemonade out of these lemons? Because this isn't a good one.
Yeah. No, I can understand that. And so when you guys got started, what, like, has it kind of evolved on what you guys offer? Have you expanded? Like, talk about a little bit of the growth that you've had over the years.
Yeah, well, it has expanded time. As you might recall, 2014 was like the first, right, that we started the business in October 2014, and then all of a sudden, crude oil markets cratered in 2015, and then they cratered again in 2016. So we launched it exactly. I don't know if it was the right time or the wrong time, but I would say that there was volatility generally, when things are up and to the right, and everybody knows, you can bet on anything and it works. Those generally aren't the good markets for analytics companies to come into, because everybody's a genius, right? Oh, I bet on this, I'm the best stock trader in the world. And you're like, yeah, but everything's going up, man. So I don't know that you are.
Yeah.
But we grew a ton into that volatility where, we had something to offer, particularly Wall Street at that point early in our phases, where we just knew a lot about these assets. And we, often like to say we take the trash out, meaning we go out and we dig into all these details, and then we set that detail up in that story for our clients to say, hey, here's the facts. Let's not argue about these. These are facts. This is data that we have. These are facts. And here's how we've modeled it going forward. And, let you make the financial decision whether this is a buy or a sell or whatever, the valuation portion of it. But we've got you all the facts, and we can also argue about the future because the future is unknown. But let's get the facts on the table and then have a discussion. And so we grew a lot through the financial space, but subsequently have now spent a lot of time with midstream companies and E&Ps and others in the industry, because you've got all the facts on their competitors. You've got detailed analysis of a basin or a region or demand centers, or you can put some logic together around how just the market will evolve from a network perspective. So there's just a lot of fun stuff that you can start to unearth. You just gotta ask questions, right? It's the ask a question and find an answer through data and then logic, really.
Yeah. So when you're looking at, like, I'm curious about your guys' kind of unique approach. You publish a lot of good like content. You guys are active on LinkedIn, market intelligence type stuff. But who is your like typical primary? Like, I don't know if I'd be your primary target, because like I find it just more like kind of good high level for my job, and like understanding like from what like the free stuff that you guys put out is like super valuable for me, and I take that and then kind of go forward with my sort of day. But like, who would you say are the people using, because you guys have multiple services, which I want to get into, but who's your target audience typically?
Yeah, the audience is the analytics group within a midstream company, you portfolio managers or analysts within a finance company, decision makers ultimately, like the guys that have to make the investment decision on, let's say, capacity to take out on different pipelines or even infrastructure to build. We do quite a bit of due diligence too on assets, because what's fun about due diligence, and we have a consulting group, so we have a product side and we have a consulting side. But what's fun about due diligence is sort of you walk in and somebody gives you a data room and they say, hey, here's a data room. And you go, well, that's nice and all, but I want to see what's not in the data room. Where's that? And you're like, well, that's in our data sets, right? It's finding all that stuff that's not in the data room, because, let's be fair, most of the time you only put good things in a data room. You don't put bad things in a data room. So,
Yeah.
it's finding that stuff, that's fun. That's the dirty little secrets, right? Those are the fun things to find. So, so we get a lot of, let's say private equity or even due diligence for industry acquisitions, where it's a, midstream company picking up another asset saying, okay, I want an outside view of this. I don't just want, we all know the phrase, when you get sort of group think, right? You don't want any group think. Everyone thinks it's great, but no one's willing to say, nah, this isn't good.
Right.
Let's have a second look at this. So we get some of that too.
Gotcha.
That's most of our client base, is those people that, honestly, it's people that have to make decisions every day in the energy industry to try to decide, are we building or buying or investing in the right things or not.
Yep. Yeah. Have you, over like since 2015, 16, when we hit that big downturn, has your sort of target like has your has your customer base changed, not necessarily on like types of companies, but I guess what I'm asking is like, have you had to kind of market differently for, say, like a younger generation or a generation that kind of looks at utilizing your types of tools differently? Like, talk a little bit about your marketing and approach on like communicating what you guys do to your potential customers. Because I'm
Well,
curious.
listen, yeah. I mean, the marketing approach is not hard. It's relatively simple. You tell a good story about the market, and then once you tell a good story, then people. Um, I want our customers to always understand the story because then they can make decisions for themselves.
Mhm.
So I want to tell that story. It brings people in saying, "Hey, you have an interesting perspective. Maybe it's the same, maybe it's different." But you're willing to tell a story about it. You're willing to not, there's no black boxes here, right? I'm not hiding anything. So if you want to see the data, I want to make that available to people to say, hey, here's the data that tells me this is what the answer is going to be. I will say that, that sort of brand, it's why we're active on LinkedIn. It's, why I enjoy telling our story on, podcasts like yours is because, people don't read email anymore. Like nobody wants to go and get marketed. I don't want to get marketed to by an email, right?
Right.
So I don't, for me, the best way to do that is to get out, tell your story. As much as my friends like to, in the younger generation, like to talk about, remote work and virtual, virtual work and whatnot, and virtual meetings. And I'm like, listen, I'm all for it. I love it, but there's still something very powerful about one-on-one in
Yeah.
an office, telling a story, drawn on a whiteboard.
Yeah.
There's just something very powerful about that human connection that I think is, and I don't think I'm that old. So, or at least I'd not like to believe I'm not that old, but there's something very fun and powerful. And I'm in my, I'm in my happy zone when I'm at a whiteboard with a bunch of smart people that all have differing ideas, and we gotta put all those pieces together on a whiteboard and say, okay, this is what it means.
Yeah.
It's
No,
fun. It's fun stuff.
no, I agree. I mean, I was, and again, I guess it depends on your role. And then there's some people that, like I have one a relative who loves working from home, like doesn't ever want to go back to an office, like just likes being in his little box and just does his job. And at the end of the day, he's done. And I just like, it's like nails on a chalkboard for me. Like I like to be
Yeah.
around people, and some of the best meetings and things that have happened, and some of the greatest ideas have come from like me and another guy's both sitting here at the office, and all of a sudden someone else comes in, and next thing you know, like you're kind of in the zone talking about things, and sparks are flying, and here you go. Like it's just you get it, you write things down, and hopefully there's some follow through because there's always a lot of good ideas, but then no, a lot of people don't want to take the bull by the horns. But
Yeah.
but to your point, like at the end of the day, I think when we look at oil and gas, it's imperative to build a good culture, and I think that's changed over the years. And again, at the end of the day, it's hard to build culture on Zoom. I don't believe you
Yeah.
can. And it's so, but anyway, it's an interesting topic.
Well, yeah, and not to sidetrack too much, but I can't help but not do this because, just with respect to culture, and I don't know what your audience is. We didn't really talk about that. Like, do you have a lot of younger folks? Do you have a lot of mid sort of mid life
It's,
sort of folks, whatever?
I would
But
say 30s, age 30s and 40s is what the data says.
okay, well, let's see if we can get you. So I would love to get you some younger folks because honestly, the reality is like some of the best ideas I've ever gotten come from people that either are brand new to the space
Yeah.
or are brand new even out of college because they ask the questions that um, I have overlooked for years, right? Meaning I think I know something and then they ask a dumb question and I'm like, well, I haven't looked at that in years. Like that ought to be something we look at again. And all of a sudden it's there all writing on the wall, like, oh my God, I missed it because I had overlooked it because I thought I knew it. Right.
Yeah.
And that's the really cool stuff. And so again, I'd encourage anybody listening to this podcast, don't forsake your idea or your experience or whatever, because the honest to God truth is you could have the most valuable idea in the world and you're hiding it because you're insecure about it or whatever, but that idea could be the game changer to make something super powerful
No, I
happen.
agree. That is I love that because for I love when we have interns come in because I grill them about like, how can we make this company different? What are you doing anything in your role that like, would you do this different, or like what's like some idea that you have for us? And
Yeah.
they kind of look at me like, like me, like, you think I have an idea? I'm like, yes, please. Cause we all have, like, we're so stuck in our ways, for to some degree. And I think to your point is like, if you have a degree of open-mindedness, and you at least consider it, but I think it's kind of like systemic in oil and gas. Like I started off on a drilling rig and I was
Yeah.
told from day one, you don't talk, you get paid from the neck down. We don't pay you to think, we don't pay you to talk. You get
Wow.
paid. Yeah, no. And I was like, yes, sir. Like I'm just gonna do my job and I am not gonna suggest anything because I would get verbally undressed by every other rig hand on the rig. And so, it was hard to break out of that. And fortunately, I'm hard headed. And so I'd still like, I didn't mind being laughed at or being told like, shut up, like that's a dumb idea. But the reality is like in oil and gas, that's kind of the old school way of doing things. It's like, you don't question me. We're going to do this because we've always done it. And if you're going to put up if you're going to get in the way of what we're trying to do, then, you're not worth having. And so, but I think
Yeah.
that's changing. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think a lot of companies are embracing sort of meritocracy and allowing people to have a voice. And that's one thing at the company I'm at. We're an oil field service company, fairly large. And we embrace people's opinions, and it's
Yeah.
like or ideas. Because to your point, like a lot of the best ideas come from people who don't have any biases and they don't know any better. And it's
Yeah.
like it'd be like, oh, actually, that it sounds kind of odd, but let's think about this in a way that there might be some validity here to how we can work off of this idea. And I think that's just how we're going to evolve, and hopefully attract more talent because we're going to need it.
Yeah, no, we're definitely going to need it as an industry, and I do think even we talk to the younger folks, and not going to certainly not going to get preachy here for the folks that are been in this industry for a while, but invite those people in and say, hey, I want your ideas because they could really help you and help the company, and B, to your point, you got to attract more people in this industry, and I think this generation and well, anybody wants a voice, right? We all want a voice, so
Of
it's
course.
good to be heard. So
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating topic. Pivoting back to sort of energy markets and stuff like that. I'm curious and you guys published it, so I encourage all the readers and I'll put the link in the show notes to look up Dirty Little Secrets. You guys are actually going to be down in Houston in a couple weeks. Can you kind of share what that's about? Because it kind of stems from the Dirty Little Secrets road show, and it's the road show, right? Is what you guys are doing?
yeah, yeah, we're doing a little road show. We're going to go down. We're going to have a happy hour, and have a bunch of people out, share some thought leadership. It's not going to be a repeat of the webinar per se. People can go back and look at that. I probably will share a couple of the same slides, but really geared towards all the questions we've gotten since then of, hey, what's this and what's that? And I want to invite, the analysts that, contributed so much to making the report and every year contribute a ton to making the report happen. While the people, I won't call them behind the scenes because they'll definitely be right on stage, but they're in from the presentation standpoint, Dirty Little Secrets, they were behind the scenes. I was just a talking head, so to speak.
Yeah.
But we're going to get them in front, answer questions. They're the guys and gals that are in the details, digging through the data. And so really more of an interactive sort of happy hour presentation esque where I'll get a lot of people involved. And then, we're in Houston. I say it's a road show because I wish we should have rented a big van, like did something like that. That'd have been cool. But we're going to go around and visit people in their offices. Not everyone can make it to a happy hour, or alternatively, like it's fun to go into people's offices and get their entire team there, and then we can banter back and forth. Cause honestly, that's the fun stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
when you get to, I don't want to just selling reports and selling, services is great, but the real fun is interacting with your clients, helping them solve problems, giving them ideas that they hadn't thought of because you're just dumb enough to, ask that dumb question because you don't work in their office or like that's the
Yeah.
fun stuff. So we'll be going around and roadshowing around to different offices of both clients and prospects. So if there's if you watch that Dirty Little Secrets thing and there's something that sparks sparks something for you, we'd love to come by and just introduce ourselves and have a market conversation. And then, if you from that see something that we can help with or might be able to help with, then we can talk about that. But
Yeah.
let's just have a fun conversation.
I think that's great, man. I love how you guys are taking it on the road and really just being flexible, not having a strict agenda, but hopefully, you get folks reaching out and you can kind of either divide and conquer, or as a team go, like you said, to different offices and stuff like that. It's funny you mentioned having a van that, yeah, you could wrap it in like
Yeah.
some, some interesting artwork or whatever, and just you guys bomb down in a van and stop at different places. And yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be hilarious. And yeah, I don't know, like it'd be, even if you, hell, if you like did a video blog, you know what I mean? Like if you
Oh, that's
like
cool.
filmed the entire thing, and then you could create content around it, and then use it for marketing, right? Like here, and then you could make a cool video, and then you could splice it up in like different sort of segments of like, oh, we were over here and we talked about NGLs, and then over here we talked about like pipeline capacity, and you could do all kinds of cool stuff with that.
Oh man, now you're giving me some ideas. We're actually renting. This is the first time we're going to try this, but we have enough people going down there. We're doing a VRBO, renting a house,
Yeah,
to, just rather than individual hotel rooms. So
I love
there's
that
some sort
idea.
of like, you remember back to the MTV days and like,
Yeah, man, that's great. That's
this could get a real world real quick.
oh man, this could be a thing. It's like, because like there's folks out there, like, obviously familiar with like influencers and stuff. They would all rent a
Yeah.
house and like film a week's worth of content in there, and then they would have it for forever. Like you could literally set up a little table with microphones. You could invite people in to do like 5-minute market segments, like, what industry are you in, and what are you seeing, and what trends that, and man, you could do
That'd be
all
fun.
you could maximize every second of you being down here, man. I can promise you.
Oh,
So
that'd be fun. Well, the cool thing is, I mean, you're maximizing it's one thing, but it just be fun. You know what I mean?
yeah.
That's the whole point of all of this stuff is you want to do work because it's fun, not because it's like work, right? Like
Yeah,
you
no,
want to do the fun stuff.
I agree, man. No, and it sounds like you do, man. I can appreciate the energy that you're giving here, and I would imagine the rest of the whole team over there is probably similar. I do want to, selfishly, I love diving into market stuff, and so I do want to kind
Yeah,
of
let's
ask
do
you a
it.
few things, because again, I'm sure the audience is interesting to hear. I look a lot of about crude oil, natural gas, because at the end of the day, my career, we live and die by rig count. But what I am interested in more so and to learn about is the NGL market. I've been kind of hearing
Oh,
some more buzz around it. And then obviously in your guys' report, you talk about crude oil, natural gas, the midstream stuff, and you also talk about NGLs. And so could you kind of give an overview of the current state of the NGL market and kind of what your guys' outlook is into 2024?
yeah. Well, I mean, the NGL market is, I mean, it's awesome. Like you think about a market from a growth standpoint that NGLs were a byproduct, right? Like this is something that people like was an afterthought, and now it's not a byproduct. It is core to many business lines and companies and their growth strategies, right? And so from a growth standpoint, most of the NGLs come from the Permian. They're coming from West Texas. Obviously, we've got a decent amount coming from the Bakken as well, and the Anadarko collects some, and we get our Marcellus stuff coming from the Northeast down, ATEX, which is moving. Everything's going to one central place. The mothership at Mont Belvieu, or most of it's coming to Mont Belvieu to be fractionated and broken into its parts and put out into the chemical space or exported or whatever. But that market's grown. It's amazing to look at, let's say, propane markets and how much that are 70% of the demand for propane is now exports, right? That is a massive shift from where it was 10 years ago. It was like 30%, and now
Wow.
it's 70%. It's a massive shift. Ethane went from, let's say, 2, 3, 4%, back in that same period of 2014 when we started East Daley, to now it's 20%. So these are markets that are growing, demand markets that are growing very fast. We're building export terminals. The market's really consolidated there. So
Okay.
when you think of the big players on the midstream side, it's Energy Transfer, it's Targa, and then it's Enterprise. I mean, those three alone from, let's say, the Permian, they just give you some, at least some perspective. So there are like 125 plants, like processing plants in the Permian, owned by 25 different, let's say, entities, companies.
Okay.
Those three companies, ET, EPD, and Targa, right now own over 50% of the capacity down there. So
Wow.
it's really dominated by those three players, or has become dominated, and it's through acquisitions. We've talked about M&A, and the continued transition of M&A, but private companies like Navitas, Lucid, which you guys, I'm sure that a lot of the folks on the podcast might be familiar with. These are companies that were picked up by Targa and EPD, and in those acquisitions, they've also, built new pipes, right? So we've got those three companies own 60% of the pipes leaving the Permian.
Wow.
So, and that's a hugely overbuilt market, meaning they built all those pipes. And really that's what's interesting about that is sort of I call it the knife fight. I don't know that those companies maybe necessarily appreciate it, but it's like, we've got this knife fight where we got all the capacity is out there, and now all of these companies are fighting for the different barrels coming out of those processing plants and how much they can gather. And it's going to make it really hard for the non top three to operate when you've got three that are really controlling that whole value chain of G&P all the way through pipeline to the fractionators in Mont Belvieu, where again those same three own most of the fractionation capacity too. So it's really a consolidated market that's getting very interesting and very tied to, as I talked about before, exports and global markets and how those move. So it's going to be interesting to watch. We're probably going to see quite a bit of pressure on prices in those markets, just because of you're going to have you're just going to have a dearth of NGLs coming out, and we're still waiting on a bit of growth on the demand side.
Gotcha. Where do you see, like, what do you think would drive growth on the demand side?
Well, I mean, you're talking PDH units in China. You're talking about, it's these foreign markets. That's the problem. Is we don't have enough growth on the U.S. side to support it, and that's the case for gas. It's the case for crude. Like, everything's going overseas, so we are very much a major market player now. We're already one of the largest exporters of natural gas. Like, obviously we know where that's come from in the last decade, like from imports to exports. Like it was not only exports, but like, top exporter, right? It's a big shift. So, everything I think that's the biggest analytics shift that has occurred, as obviously in the energy industry as a whole, but I would put that as, probably top on the biggest analytic shifts and market shifts, is just our dependency on exports to drive demand. And then what volatility that can potentially create, which was a big theme of the report, was volatility. And we're where our market's so tightly wound around what happens in other markets now, and not just, when I entered the space, it was like natural gas in particular. It's like everything all depended on the weather in New York and stuff, and that still matters. Don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of export capacity that and deliverability that matters these days.
Yeah. So talk about the volatility that you mentioned in your report. I mean, obviously we have, there was Russia, Ukraine, but then there's the the Red Sea and the turmoil over there. How would you say a lot of that, like, how does that impact what you're doing, and how do you typically think about things differently so that you can still deliver on some, again, your models or your analytics can accurately reflect what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, the volatility is really around the tightness in the market. So if you go back, like I'll go, I'll talk about gas, for instance. We were in this period where all of the demand we had was supplied by Permian, and Permian is an oil play. It's not a gas play. So it was relatively inelastic towards, what gas prices did, which obviously, as everybody sort of knows, it drove gas prices down, but it also drove volatility down. If there was any fluctuation in demand, let's say, there was just this dearth of gas and the storage coffers were full, and everything was not volatile. Well, then we got to COVID, right? And oil prices crashed. The growth outlook for the Permian and all this, associated gas that were dumping on the market just sort of disappeared. And we had a ton of volatility start to enter the market in 21, 22, as you think about demand fluctuations. When's demand coming back? When are we shipping, boats overseas? What's power going to do? All of a sudden power enters the sector, and We are, hitting records every single year on power demand and power consumption in the gas sector, at least. So it's that tightness that creates that volatility, because there's if you think about it today, we're about to add, we're already at 12 to 14 BCF per day of LNG demand, and then we're going to add Golden Pass and Plaquemines, and they're gonna build a bigger base, which consumes, let's say more. I'll just, for lack of just to make it easy, consumes more of that base load Permian supply.
Yeah.
And so anything incrementally above that has to be met by more elastic sources of supply, like the Haynesville, which if the prices go up, Haynesville producers show up. If the prices go down, Haynesville producers, slow down. And so the bunch of other factors play into this that have changed in the space, capital discipline being one of them. Producers just aren't, putting holes in the ground every single day without paying attention to cash flow. So they're very cognizant of cash flow and investors' needs, and that's changed the equation. We haven't built storage. So in the gas sector, when a hurricane comes through and you've got, let's call it 20 BCF of LNG along the Gulf Coast that says, okay, we can't move boats out for a couple of days because there's a hurricane in the Gulf. We need somewhere to put the supply. Okay, well, we haven't built any storage in, much storage. We've built a couple, but we haven't built much storage in a decade, right? So where's that supply going to go? Well, it's going to go into the storage coffers, but those fill up really quick. And then the only thing to moderate supply and demand is price.
Right.
So therefore, that's what creates that volatile environment where, we've got price. And in particular, we see that volatility in gas, at least this year, because producers have pulled up back as they should at a lower price. And so we're starting to take that high storage level where we're, well above the 5-year average and start to drift down below the 5-year average. And that's where things get volatile. There's just less ability to respond to, supply and demand fluctuations if there are some.
Right. So I want to kind of go back to talk a little bit about the Permian. A lot of our customers are in the Permian, and there's been a challenge with just, again, how much gas they're when you look at the oil and gas ratio, there's a lot more, they're kind of diverging, right? Like oil's somewhere going down, you're getting more water, you're getting more gas. I often joke and say, eventually we're going to be talking about associated oil production, not associated gas production, just because of the direction there. But how do you, like, when you look forward and you project, if the trend continues, how does that change? And obviously with the export capacity being brought online over the next 5 years from all these LNG export facilities, that's going to help. But is there enough infrastructure in place or planned for all that offtake to get to the Gulf Coast to export? I mean, can you just, like, on a macro, just kind of explain what's going on there?
Yeah, so from an infrastructure standpoint, let's go back a little bit to sort of NGLs and gas at that GMP level, because we spend a lot of time in the in the field. And one of our base models, as I told you before, is talking about how do you build up from an asset level every single asset. So we model and track every rig and connect it to every GMP system, and every well to every GMP system. So we're trying to really model from a ground up what volumes go into which plants, what rigs are putting volumes into which plants. So we can then go downstream and say, okay, how much volume is gonna, when we're doing a forecast, how much volume is gonna feed these plants? How much volume is gonna feed these pipelines? And do we have enough takeaway? So that's part of the sort of ground up analysis. And what you asked about with GMP in particular, if we take that as our first piece of infrastructure, we are building enough GMP. It matches our current forecast for the amount of growth in the Permian over the next few years. So, but it's an exact match, meaning we're building exactly as much GMP as we need through to that. GMP plants generally get announced about 18 months ahead of time. So we're right on track with the 18-month growth trend. Beyond that, obviously, if you can't carry the forecast forward, we don't have enough infrastructure there and not enough planned. But again, these are short timelines, lower capital intensive projects. We're talking 200 million, something like that, to build a plant. It doesn't take a big commitment, nor moving heaven and earth to get it done, through the regulatory bodies and whatnot. It's easier to get done. On the pipeline side, I talked about NGLs before. We got plenty of NGL capacity. For the gas coming out of the ground, we have proposed enough. We've got Matterhorn coming online in mid or third quarter next year in 24. So that's a big one that'll put gas into Katy, so all the way into your neck of the woods. Yep. And that's 2.5 BCF. So that's a big line. The other one that's out there that we think will get done, and we're sort of just waiting for confirmation from that, is there's a Saguaro LNG facility that's being built on the Baja Peninsula, and we're on the west side of Mexico, and that is going to be fed by a ONEOK pipeline that'll take Permian gas west. So through Mexico Pacific Limited. And anyway, that should provide ample capacity for Permian gas to get out, which is good for Permian producers, right? You're not going to see basis disconnects or differentials that hurt the value of your molecules coming out of the ground from a gas perspective. So we have enough infrastructure and are planning enough to get it done. The thing that holds the Permian back, and I appreciate your joke about, an associated oil play. But the reality is oil still drives a lot of that. And so we, for two reasons, we see the backwardation of the curve continuing to trim rig counts in the future. So that's one area where we could be wrong, like every year, is the curve really backwardated? I mean, I think there's this, I guess, prevalent theme about, sort of the peak demand and death of oil and, whatever. So it sort of drives the curve naturally that way. But the reality is we continue to hit, higher production numbers out of the Permian, and the curve always sort of magically, is higher than it looks in the forwards, right? So that might be a bit of an underestimate of where the curve's going to be. The other thing that's driving that we're watching in the Permian, and we talk about this in the report, is that consolidation, especially the public to private consolidation. There was a 70% reduction of rigs from private companies once they get consolidated into a public company. And this sort of makes sense with respect to aligning that fiscal discipline mentality, where a public company buys a private company, they cut the rigs to align them with their, capital discipline protocol and what their plan is. And the reality is those publics really are trying to shore up long-term inventory, right? So it's to their benefit to cut a couple of rigs to make sure that they get the benefit of that long-term inventory analysis. So that's where we're, from a Permian perspective, we feel good with where our forecast is, which has, overall Permian growth. I think we have it at, between now and 2030, we have it about 3.9 BCF of additional gas. And obviously, I think if you held a flat rig count, that would go up. It'd go up by several BCF. It'd go, 5 or 6 BCF. But that's where we're comfortable with it now because of the current consolidation and because of the, the backwardation of the curve. But that's where I say, let's tell a story and argue about the future, because it's a fair argument to say, well, the curve's not going to end up there. Peak demand isn't happening, and everyone's wrong about the forward curve, and producers are going to continue to produce into it, and there'll be more efficiencies, and which is always something I get. It's always a nervousness. People are like, well, what's the total inventory look like? And I'm like, I don't know. Can you tell me what technology looks like in 5 years? And I'll tell you what total inventory looks like. Like this stuff changes massively.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's one thing that I think people have underestimated, is just the amount of advancements in technology that's allowed us to extract more. I mean, again, I'm pretty close to a bunch of drilling completions engineers, and I was talking to a buddy of mine who's on the business development side for a company who's pretty big in the Bakken, and they're going to drop rigs, but through completion technology, they're actually anticipating production growth. And so, again, there's a lot of wild cards out there, and I know people are working tirelessly on completion technology. Drilling efficiencies have gotten to a point where, like, you're knocking Eagle Ford wells out in 6-7 days. Same thing with the Bakken. A lot of the wells out in the Permian, like drilling efficiency have gotten so much better. So you can, you're able to, the amount of reservoir footage you're drilling doesn't require near the rig count. And so it's, again, and like how much more efficient can we get? I mean, each year you talk to folks like, oh man, there's not too much meat on the bone, but then all of a sudden they do some unique stuff with whether it be just cycle times or offline operations or whatever the case is. But it's tough to sort of forecast that, but kind of tying it all together. And again, we didn't really even talk about crude and the other things, and we're already blown almost an hour here, but I am curious. So on your guys' Dirty Little Secrets, you have at the end of 2024, natural gas, you're forecasting to be close to that $4 per MMBTU. And so just curious, coming, it looks like the first part of the year is going to be slightly soft, goes down, and then towards the end of the year it's going to pick up. And what's driving that increase, or what's putting the upward pressure on price for Henry Hub?
Yeah, our expectation is that we think that producers are going to produce into the Golden Pass and Plaquemines coming online. We need more supply to fill those facilities by the end of the year. So while there's softness at the front and tightening in the back, we're going to see some response to that. It's one of the key things. I mean, you watch rigs, we're watching rigs too, right? Like, because it's like so key to see how are rigs deployed in the front to start to drive some of that 4, 5, 6 month production out to feed those facilities. And otherwise, if you don't have that, you do start to run into an issue where you see price spikes that go way beyond our expectation of $4 because we don't have enough supply to feed those markets. And that's where, again, watching that storage number too is critical of how close are we to that 5-year average, how far below, because the sort of indispensable baseload growth in the Permian, again, producers are just going to do what they're going to do there. They're not, the capital discipline mantra has meant that there's less, elasticity. They're moving. They're not deploying rigs as quickly when oil goes up, $5 or $10, right? They're sticking to their plan and carrying out a more longer term, fiscally. I don't want to call it fiscally responsible, but they're capital discipline, right? It's like, let's make sure we have cash flow. Yeah. So that's where I think, for us, we're looking this year at a dip. So production continues to, sort of slide off. Rigs, we're going to watch for rigs as they start to re-enter, the Haynesville area in preparation for feeding all that infrastructure we've added and still are adding down from the Haynesville in northern Louisiana down to, the Gulf Coast there. Because we've got 6 Bs of pipe either that have come online or going to come online within this year. And all that infrastructure is there to feed those facilities. And so filling those up, we need the supply to do that.
And on that topic, from now till the end of the year, what is the increase in export capacity look like towards the end of the year? Like, I looked at it quite a while ago, but I forget. Do you recall?
Yeah, the total. We've got Golden Pass and Plaquemines are the 2 facilities that are being added towards. They're really late in 24, right? So we're talking, I think I want to say like November, December, all 4Q. Plaquemines is their first phase is somewhere around 2 BCF, and that Golden Pass facility is also around I think 2.5, 2.7 BCF. So that's let's just call it 4 BCF of incremental demand that'll start to ramp up at the very end of the year, and then trickle into 25. The interesting component of that will be you put those 2 facilities online, 4 BCF. Producers are producing, let's say, in to meet that, but it's not like there's a magic off switch at 4 BCF, right? Producers, the curve just keeps going. And so that's where we're interested to see, 25, 26 prior to, significant new LNG capacity really entering the market. If that trend continues, then all of a sudden now you're going to start to see downward pressure on prices again in that 25, 26 timeframe before, you really get the ramp of that second phase of LNG. Or you could see producers pull back a little bit, trim some rigs in the 25, early 26 timeframe, waiting for some of that, that with the expectation that LNG will show up And we'll get a lot more clarity on that as we see, LNG facility timelines, construction timelines, things like that.
Gotcha. Well, man, I could keep going here, but in the interest of time, we'll probably have to to shut this thing down. I looked at the time, and another 15 minutes is blown by. But man, it'd be cool to do a round two, maybe beginning of next year, and kind of recap this year and see if what we were thinking made sense, and kind of what you
Yeah.
guys think into the following year. But man, this has been an absolute fascinating discussion. For folks that are listening and they're interested to hear more, where's the best place to find more information about East Daley and some of the stuff that you guys are putting out?
Yeah, go to our website. There is a ton of free stuff. As Justin, as you said, like Justin, I can't remember if you're on the free stuff, but you should get it, man. I think you are.
I am, yeah.
And there's a ton of free stuff out there. There's a daily note we put out. Again, it's really like we focus on really detailed stuff and then try to macro it up to what does it mean,
Right.
for whatever perspective. So it's never just here's detail for detail's sake. It's detail for what does it mean. So there's that. We just launched a partnership with Hart on a what is
Congrats.
the yeah, it's cool. It's a gas and midstream report. They do it weekly. That's free. You should go check that out. There's a link to it on our blog. Love for people to sign up and join that community too.
Yeah.
I love you're building a community with this podcast. We're trying to do the same with some of our research, is build just a community of people that really love this space, love the energy, love the transparency, which is what our company is focused on driving, is transparency through data. And love to have you guys join our community. There's a crude newsletter too that's free. So there's just all sorts of, I'm sure we'll launch one on NGLs here at some point in the not too distant future. So please come join the community. We'd love to have you. And then just learn about the space and ask questions, and love to come visit you. If you're in Houston or New York or Tulsa or Oklahoma City or all my favorite energy towns, we'd love to come
Yeah.
visit you.
I love it, man. Well, this was a lot better than I expected. And so again, Justin, really appreciate your time.
Oh,
I knew it was going to be good, but not this good, man. I trust me.
yeah,
I didn't
you
set the
you
bar
you
low.
thought, hey, I'm gonna get a boring engineer and analyst on this phone. That's what you thought.
Hey, you said it, not me. You said it, not me.
Hey,
No,
I
but
know this. I know the stereotypes, and I'm blonde, so
no, I always go into it with an
and I'm
open
a
mind.
jock.
I always go into it with an open mind, but I at least just sometimes I'm like, hey, okay, let's see what kind of direction this is gonna go. But man, it's been great to get to know you. I really hope to get to see you here in Houston when you guys roll down. I'll try my
Yeah,
best to get in front of you. But for everyone out there listening, please connect with East Daley. Obviously, like I have multiple newsletters coming through and just so much quality information that again, I applaud you guys for giving a lot of this stuff out for free, because most of the stuff is behind a paywall nowadays. And I get it. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's a business, but clearly you guys are doing a lot of things right. And again, just appreciate all the content and education that you guys put out there. I'll put all the links in the show notes to all the stuff that we've talked about. And for everyone out there, let's always make sure that we're approaching the energy landscape with a radically open mind. Be kind and always remember that everyone deserves access to energy, and we is greater than me. Thanks, everybody.